Galileo, let's start with you. There's probably nobody I know who's more of a Tesla bull than you are, so I kind of already anticipate that I know the answer to this question, but just how concerned should investors be about this spate of recalls?
They do recalls like this, or they've done recalls like this in the past, and it usually doesn't have too much of a material financial impact. And it's also important to remember these recalls are voluntary. A lot of other automakers wait till something goes wrong and then do a recall, so I think this is kind of just sort of an industry standard.
We are looking at a Tesla chart here, and we should say that it is still up about 3% here pre-market. So Todd, we want to bring you in as well. This is a 5-minute chart we're looking at overnight, of course, again, up almost 3%. Todd, what do you make of this recall?
You know, he's right. These happen pretty regularly. They happen in the auto business. Ford's recall is something that most car buyers are used to. The difference between mainstream automakers and Tesla is that Tesla doesn't have its own dealerships or franchise dealerships or service facilities, so they have to basically fly someone in to make a fix. That's fine if you have Model S's that sell for $100,000 and have owners who have maybe 3 or 4 other cars. But if you're going to get into the mainstream market with a $35,000 to $55,000 car that might sell to people who maybe have maybe 2 other cars, how are you going to get all those fixed in a reasonable amount of time?
Todd, let's stick with you. Bloomberg reporting last week that Tesla's Model 3 is the best-selling electric car in America. A lot of this, of course, has to do with just how popular orders have been for the lower price Model 3. How sustainable do you think it is that Tesla can hold on to this?
Well, the Model 3 had a lot of popularity when it launched. There were between 300 and 400,000 orders, but Tesla stopped reporting on the number of orders after that. So we don't know, given all the delays in production, given that they're now building roughly 2,000 per week instead of 10,000 per week, which was the goal by the end of this year, I believe, how many of those orders might be canceled. I mean, you're talking about if they sell 100,000 cars globally, I guess, because that's what they built this year, that's a pretty good number for an electric car. It's still a very small number compared with the mainstream market. The electric car market accounts for about 1.5% in the U.S. and about 1% globally. So they still have a long way to go, but yeah, it's a good start for them, but they're far from reaching their goals.
Galileo, you are nodding your head here as Todd was giving that last answer. Do you want to add something?
Yeah, Tesla has a customer deposits line on its balance sheet that was about $830 million last quarter. It was actually up from about $600 million the previous quarter, partially due to the Semi and Roadster reservations, but that indicates there's probably still at least 300,000 or 400,000 Model 3 orders on the books. And despite all these production issues, as you point out, the Model 3 is already the best-selling electric vehicle in the United States, and by a wide margin. The second battery electric vehicle that's not a Tesla is the Chevy Bolt, and that's sold about 4,300 units, and the Model 3 has sold about 8,100.
Let's talk a little bit about some other recent news from Tesla. Moody's downgrading the company's credit rating recently, but at the same time, Tesla coming out last week saying we don't actually need to raise money this year. Elon Musk, Galileo, has said this in the past and then gone on to raise money. Are you concerned at all that the company will run out of cash?
Tesla's business model, while they're sort of in startup mode, has been to consistently raise money. I think when he was including that in the press release, he just wanted to make it very clear, like, we're not on the precipice of bankruptcy. We don't need to raise money to stay afloat, but we will do selective capital raises to accelerate growth and, try and raise money in an accretive fashion. So I just think that's always been a part of their business model.
We can see, too, by looking at this, a longer-term chart on the TradeStation platform, that it's been essentially what appears is almost if a flat year for Tesla right now, right? So it did ebb up at certain times here in the past 12 months or so, but of course then fell precipitously leading into April. Yes, it has staged a sharp rebound, which you can see over there on the right-hand side, but it has been a volatile stock, and a stock that had been up, and up with a lot of momentum for a long time, and some of that momentum seeming to cool here a bit. We had teased that we were going to talk about Ford as well, and so Todd, we want you to weigh in. Ford, of course, seen a single-digit increase, low single-digit increase in auto sales of late here. Do you think Ford, a company like a Ford, including Ford, can be a competitor to Tesla?
Well, they're planning to launch some electric cars in the early part of the next decade. They're playing a bit of catch up. I think GM is ahead of Ford in that regard, especially with the Chevrolet Bolt. One point to make about that, though, when you talk about Tesla stock and so on, is that Tesla has not made any money, and it has not made any money on Model S's and Model X's that sell for anywhere from about $90,000 to $120,000, depending on how many options you load up on it. How is it going to make money on a $35,000 to $55,000 Model 3? So yeah, maybe Elon Musk doesn't need to raise money for the time being, but from what I've heard, you better watch past the third quarter whether he's going to need to make money. Building more Model 3s, if you're losing money on each one, and that still appears to be the case, is not going to raise cash in time for the fourth quarter.
Yeah, Galileo, to Todd's point, how do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, the automotive business is super capital intensive. So with the Model S and X, they had weak gross margins to start, but before Model 3 production really took off, we were seeing gross margins in the mid-20s% for Tesla. So I think that proves on a unit level, they're actually selling their cars very, very profitably. The difference is in their operating expenses. They're opening all these stores to be able to set up to sell millions of cars per year. Their core company is bloated right now until they scale the Model 3. And then I think we're going to see the unit economics of the whole company really start to turn.
Of course, the overall market's up today in Ford stock, too, up about almost 2%.
Todd Lass, Detroit Bureau Chief of Automobile Magazine, and Galileo Russell, founder of HyperChange TV. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. It's good conversation about Tesla today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.